Welcome back to Nonsense, I'm Chris, and American Dad's third episode of the new season feels to me like a return to form, finally taking another real-world issue that a lot of people struggle with, our fear that not being useful to the people in our lives will lead them to abandon us or think less of us, and how that fear can lead to really unhealthy choices, and it wraps that theme around an otherwise absurd story concept, which is exactly where American Dad is at its best in my opinion. So let's break down the missable jokes and animation details of the episode, which opens with a theme song, but gets interrupted because Steve and Francine have been replaced by Rogu and Jeff because it turns out Steve is sick and Francine's taking care of him. So naturally, Stan is livid that Steve isn't just powering through, and he does this bit where he checks his watch, reminding us that Stan always has a wristwatch on that we almost never see. I'm also surprised we didn't see Steve's green triceratops, at least mixed in with all these new stuffed animals. Out of frustration though, while Stan is making out with Jeff, Steve goes and infects his lunch and steering wheel so Stan gets sick too. In the CIA establishing shot, I wonder what Bullock was showing Styles here, but inside, Stan is working and helps fix the printer before infecting himself with his lunch. So the next day, Steve taunts him about suddenly being sick, but Stan insists on powering through. He heads to work where he grosses everyone out, cause yeah, if you're sick, just stay home please. And to prove a point, he decides to work out and party as well, so he obviously wakes up feeling worse the next morning. But Steve taunts him about powering through, so Stan heads into work anyways, where we see Reggie the koala sadly sitting in a cage waiting to be blended up by Dr. Weitzman, who Stan asks for some kind of medicine to help him power through. Weitzman says yes, but asks him to put on a hazmat suit, to which Stan responds,
"Oh, strap on a chin diaper? No thanks. Go woke, go broke."
A reminder that Stan is still meant to be hyper-conservative, which definitely means something, violently different today than it meant when the show premiered in 2005. Who knew we'd look back fondly? But the raccoon claws Stan in the face before some bats attack him and he falls into a cabinet of bioweapons, but for some reason Dr. Dubs just lets Stan go home, and by the morning he looks like death, missing teeth and bald patches and all. So Francine calls Weitzman, and during the conversation he says,
"Oh great, now you got me saying it."
Which, given that there's at least two former college humor writers now working on American Dad, there's no way it's not a reference to Jake and Amir.
Now you got me saying it.
Now you got me saying it. You said it first. Anyway, this is a snatch made in heaven.
Anyways, Weitzman tells her Stan won't die, but is going to be incredibly weak for a while, so Francine tells Stan to stay in bed, but he insists on doing his morning song, which I guess Francine pretends to be asleep for, but he shatters his bones on the jump, and yet somehow still gets to work. That night, Francine tells Steve she knows he got Stan sick on purpose, and whenever I see a lavender octopus, it makes me think of Family Guy's Stewie's one. Feels like a reference. But she tells him he has to take care of Stan since he got him sick, so he takes him to the doctor, who you may recognize the voice of.
"Stan, I'm going to list a series of 4 numbers, and after I finish, I'd like you to repeat them back to me."
That's Chris Parnell, Jerry's voice actor from Rick and Morty, as well as Dr. Spaceman from 30 Rock and a million other things, most notably SNL though. Anyways, he gives Steve a pamphlet because Stan's going to turn into a Gollum-esque feral ghoul unless he can get him to stay in bed. So Steve helps him into bed, but as he pours Stan some medicine, he sneaks out of bed for work, only for Steve to drag him back. It keeps happening though, with Stan starting to hallucinate, and Steve keeps trying to figure out why Stan won't let himself take a day off as he finally gets Stan to take his medicine and walks away. But Stan faked it using a continuation of this gag from the Weed Factory episode.
"We got high together!"
I didn't get high. Whiz kids at the lab cooked this up to keep me from getting stoned. A big plastic bag.
Meanwhile, Steve is watching centaurs get it on and about to do so with himself, only to be interrupted by Stan making noise because he's turned into the feral ghoul the doctor warned Steve about, and he attacks Steve. So he calls the doctor, who informs him the disease has spread and the town is up in flames. We cut to the next morning as everyone but Stan is watching the news before the power goes out, and we see that they chain Stan up like a puppy. But he escapes, so they have to hole up in Steve's room until Weitzman shows up 3 days later to say he needs Stan's blood to make a cure for everyone. So Francine tells Steve he has to get Stan's blood since he started this whole thing, kind of. But first they discover that Stan has built a fake office in the attic and is pretending to be at work, and in summary of the lesson of the episode,
"Clearly, job central to sense of self-worth."
And that's why he's never been able to rest, to take a sick day from work, because it would mean having to admit they really could get by without him.
And then he wouldn't feel needed, wouldn't feel
useful. And to him, if he doesn't feel useful, then he feels worthless.
And the lesson, in my opinion, applies more to the recent generations than ever before. I personally spent the first decade of my adult life having to squeeze every second of my day for everything it was worth. Regular 60-hour-a-week job, plus part-time phone support, and I Ubered and DoorDash whenever I had free time. I made myself use those stupid survey apps where you get pennies to fill out surveys while I was using the bathroom or waiting in line somewhere, so that even that time was monetized. Even this channel started as a way of hopefully monetizing the little time I gave myself to watch my guilty pleasure in life, animated sitcoms, and I was the same way Stan was. Nothing could change if I got sick or I didn't feel well in any way. I just had to ignore it and keep going. And take it from me, it's just not a healthy way to live. Unfortunately, not everyone has a choice. It's a great lesson though, and I love when the show tackles more serious issues like this.
You don't need to be important at work. You don't need to be useful. All you need to be is you. Dad, you're enough. Please just be you.
Just be me?
But anyways, while they're coming up with a plan for Steve to pretend to be Jackson, Roger says, which is a reference to Johnny Carson's intro when he was a late-night host. Steve goes up to the attic pretending to be Jackson though, and despite being attacked, he manages to talk Stan down before knocking him out and taking the blood sample. We then cut to Stan finally staying in bed for a sick day, having learned his lesson. And that's all I've got for this episode. I'm working on the next Rick and Morty episode breakdown still. It's the Devil Shop one, so there's a lot of background stuff I'm having to figure out, since like half the objects are very specific references, so I'm sorry it's taking so long, but I am working on it. I'm also definitely doing the next new American Dad episode after that, and I might do the season premiere of Bob's Burgers that's coming up, so be sure to subscribe if you love animated sitcoms, leave a comment if you saw something I missed or if there's anything you'd like me to cover, and I'll see you in the next video.